Awesome. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome, thanks. Cool. So today we're going to go over Docker Swarm. Like I said just a little bit ago, Docker Swarm is somewhat like Kubernetes, just with a lot less features. But yeah, they somewhat do the same thing, but very differently. Cool. So let's just jump right into it. Let me actually just post this in the Zoom chat. I know everyone's got the link, but just in case, there you go. Cool. Can I get a volunteer to read this first part, please?
Yeah, I got it. All right. Docker Swarm is a container orchestration tool built and managed by Docker. It's built into the Docker engine, making it a lightweight and convenient choice for managing a cluster of Docker nodes and deploying services to them.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yes, that is very true. It is very lightweight. So if you ever need something like Docker Swarm to kind of manage all your containers, but you have like very small scale, Docker Swarm could be actually like a really good option for you. Larger scale, I would absolutely 100% go with like something like Kubernetes or something like Kubernetes. There's lots of different flavors out there. But yeah, so key concepts, we're just going to go over some terminology real quick. So a swarm is a group of Docker nodes joined into a cluster. So you just think of a bunch of Docker nodes. Um, a node is an instance on the Docker engine participating in the swarm. It can be a manager node or a worker node. That's kind of the big takeaway is a manager or a worker. A manager tells everything what to do. A worker is you could have multiple workers in a swarm and only one manager in a swarm. A service is a definition of task to execute on the manager or worker nodes. A task is a single container running command in a service, and a stack is a group of interrelated services that share dependencies and can be orchestrated and scaled together. So do we have any questions on this terminology so far? I know we haven't really got into it yet, but
What's Docker nodes?
it node is more of a concept than an actual. It's like a server. So like each server is a node.
Oh,
So you'll have like a manager
I don't know
server.
how does it work with the containerization? Like, is it kind of like the nodes we learned about? Was it last module?
It's just what you're going to be running the container on.
Okay, but
Yeah.
it's local. It's not
Yeah.
using.
Just so there's like some things are kind of always like interchanged, like node, server, or like host. Those terms get tossed around quite a bit. But think of node as more of like a logical box.
Okay.
Yeah, and just know that you're going to have multiple nodes in a swarm. One being a manager, and you're going to have a bunch of little worker nodes that are going to be running like their own containers. Cool, good question though. So use cases of Docker Swarm. Docker Swarm is an excellent when you need a simple, straightforward way to manage a cluster of Docker nodes, want to quickly and easily scale services across multiple nodes, and require fault tolerance, zero downtime deployments. These are all good parts of Docker Swarm. Docker Swarm is also like built in to the Docker engine already, so there's no extra dependencies that you required. So it's really quick to get it set up and get going. That and the commands are super easy they're pretty straightforward. There's nothing terribly absurd about them. Okay, so benefits of Docker Swarm. Simplicity. Docker Swarm is built into Docker, which makes it easier to use when you're already familiar with Docker. Guess I just said that. Scalability allows you to quickly and easily scale your applications. And fault-tolerant Docker Swarm ensures your application is always running by restarting containers when they fail. So that's also something very good by Kubernetes. It does the same thing. So like if you have a node go down, or let's just say a container goes down, um, then another container will take its place that does the exact same thing. Like you could have, they're called replicas, and they're really just like clones of each other. And so, that way, if you're doing a deployment and something breaks something, you have, something to fall back on. So your application has little to no downtime. Alternatives to Docker Swarm. There's a lot. But yeah, Kubernetes is the big one. That's kind of like the main player in the room. I know every cloud has like their own, like Amazon EKS is a flavor of Kubernetes. Oracle has it's called OKE, or now they have OMK. Um, but yeah, so each cloud provider typically has a flavor of Kubernetes. Kubernetes is just kind of like the OG. But yeah, just way more feature rich than Docker Swarm. Docker Swarm is very simple at its core. You can still do a lot with it, don't get me wrong. And it's a lot faster to set up than Kubernetes or not EKS, sorry, that's Oracle. ECS. Cool. Swarm. Here we'll learn to set up a Docker Swarm cluster with manager and worker nodes. So first you need to initialize the swarm. You need to be on the manager node for this. So for this, I've just gone ahead and created a master node and a database EC2 instance, right? So two EC2 instances. I just called one master and one DB. You can name them whatever you want. Oops. Well, actually, just exit out of that. Cool. So to do this, to initialize your swarm on your manager, you're just going to run Docker swarm init advertise adder stands for address, and then the IP of the manager node. But remember, you have to be like SSH into your manager node to do this. So we'll just go ahead and copy this, and I will go ahead and grab my manager node's public IP right here. Oh, here, let me do a sudo. You might have to do a sudo if you don't give your user on the EC2 instances permissions yet, which I haven't. So I'll just do a sudo. That'll be fine. And so what it says right here is swarm initiated, current node, and I'll give you some random output, is now a manager. And so if you want to add a following worker node in the same swarm, since now we've initialized it, you have to run this command on the worker node to add it to this one so they can link to each other. But make sure that you guys have the proper security groups in place too. Your inbound and outbound rules. You can just put like quad zero for like allow all, so you don't have to like keep on putting in like manual IP addresses for like each different like worker node or whatever. And that's just so they can communicate between the two, right? You have to allow that traffic between IPs. Cool. So we've successfully created a swarm and initialized our master node. And so if we wanted to check this to see like a swarm, we could just do a Docker node ls. Oops, I keep forgetting to do the sudo. Node ls, and we can see. Let me actually just like move this over a little bit so you can see that. As you can see, it's called our leader and our status is active. We're ready. Cool. But here's like the little ID. It'll just auto generate like a random one for you for each one, which is pretty cool. So let's actually go ahead and add, oh, let's just read this. So initialize, yep, we did that. Replace that. Yep. Once the command executes successfully, display the command of the worker nodes to this form. Make note of this as we'll need it later. There is a command to get this back. I forgot what it's called. Maybe it's like Docker. It's some kind of Docker command. I forgot it off the top of my head. But anyways, so if we wanted to add this, we'll just go and SSH into our worker node, which I just already have up here, since everyone already knows how to SSH into an EC2 instance. And I'll run this. Oh, I almost forgot to review the sudo. I've also not given this permissions. So sudo docker swarm join, and then the token that is passed in. So really just like copy and paste this command from the master from initializing the swarm and just post it on your worker node. Cool. So, and it just spit out this this node is joined a swarm as a worker. So now if we go back to the master node and run that same command of docker node ls, we should the sudo docker node ls, and we now see we have two nodes. So so there's nothing on here for the manager except for the manager, it just calls leader. So that's how you know it's a worker node. Does anyone have questions on that? I want to make sure I'm not losing anyone. Cool. Yeah, pretty simple. Um, but why would we want to do this? Right? Say we have a bunch of containers that we need created and we want to be fault tolerant, right? Like one goes down, whatever, then the other one will take its place. That's why you link them up. But the master node is really just to create what's called services in Docker. And so to create these services, which, let's just say we want to make like three replicas of the same container, we can absolutely do that on the worker node and the master node as well. Let's actually go ahead and do that right now. So I'm on the manager node or master node, whatever you want to call it. It's kind of interchanged. Let's just go ahead and create this directory called docker compose.yaml. And oh, actually, I already got it created. Cool. But yeah, so this is just a simple service, just a basic version. And then we're just pulling the image of Nginx latest on port 8080, and we just want to have specify three replicas. So it's going to make three containers of the Nginx image. Cool. So let's just escape colon WQ to save and quit out of that. This is called the service, by the way. And so to deploy said service, right, we want to create those containers with the Nginx image. We run this command right here. It's just docker stack deploy -c, which is like the file that you're calling it. And then you're giving it a name of whatever you want. In this case, we're going to call it my app. Cool. So let's actually just copy this and just do a sudo, and then we'll do the command. No such file, docker compose. Did I spell that wrong?
Reno, do you have to use Docker Compose with Swarm, or can you do a regular Docker file?
You can do regular doc files. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? Because I said, here, one second. Let me copy this over again. I called it YAML and not YML. So let's go ahead and put a sudo here and run it. Cool. So if we wanted to test to see if these containers are running, we can do well, actually, let's just make sure the service is good, right? And you can list out all the services, but it's just going to be a Docker service ls, just like how we wanted to see the nodes. We can do a Docker node ls. I'll just do a sudo here. And we can see it is up, and we have and the name of my web app. If we wanted to see the containers, we are on the master node, so this is a little interesting. So this is going to be a little tricky, but if we just do let's do a sudo and then docker ps to list out containers. Let's see what happens. We're only going to get one container on the master node. You can see it. Oh, I'm sorry. No containers on the master node. Oh, did one of them fail? Actually, let's try it on the worker node. Sudo docker ps. Okay, maybe the other one's just still provisioning, but here are two of the containers out of the three that we specified on the worker node. Let's try that again. Docker PS. Yep, there it is. Okay, so it just took a minute to create. But one of them creates on the master node, and then which is the one that's going to be in use, and then it'll switch over. I'll like say if this one like fails or goes down or something happens to it, it will switch over to one of the worker containers on the worker node. So that's pretty useful, right? I could be running for instance, like my front end server, and have, like three replicas of it. And if it goes down, because I deploy like a bad patch or something, then it'll get picked up and just be like more fault tolerant, and more rich. But that's pretty much what a service does. It's just specifying like replicas and like image types, just stuff for your containers. You can put a bunch of stuff in there. But yeah, that's just a real basic one, just the Nginx image, what ports to expose, the replica count. But yeah, so we have our service. What happens if we want to upgrade it, right? Like we want to downplay it or upplay it or whatever. Well, actually here, let's do this first. We could do the docker inspect. So sudo docker inspect the service. So docker service inspect. And then we would just do the my app. Ooh, it's actually my app. Was it web? What we called it? Oh, sorry. I'm doing this on the manager or the worker node, and I need to be on the manager node. So all your commands pretty much going to be run from your manager node. So we'll do a sudo docker service inspect, and then what do we call it? Like my app. Oh, my app. Was it web? Cool. And then it just gives you all the data for your service and your containers. As you can see, a bunch of boring stuff, but I'm sure it'll say like Nginx somewhere in here. Oh yeah, like here's the image. But if you ever have to, I don't know, like dive deep on it, then you can absolutely do that. So that's how you inspect the service. But if you wanted to scale it, say we wanted to go to 5, we could absolutely do that. And then we can just do this Docker. Oh, I'll have to do the sudo again. That's filling. So Docker or sudo Docker service scale, right? Scale just means you want to update it. And then you just specify the name of the service, which is my app web, and then 5. That's just going to increase the replica count to 5. So as you can see, it creates a couple more replicas. Cool. And so that is converged. Cool. So now if you want it to, so that just updates the service, but if you actually want to deploy the service, so we've updated it, but it's not deployed yet, then we have to run this Docker stack deploy, and then here, I'll just sudo, and then Docker stack deploy -c, and you're just pointing it to the file, right? Oh, I actually need to change that to YAML instead of YML. You could use either or. Both YAML extensions work, YML or YAML spelled out, and then just the name of um, the service itself. And so that'll deploy it. Let's see, since detach was not specified, test will be created in the background. Yep, no, that's totally fine. Cool. So now if we go back to our worker and run a sudo docker ps. Oh, maybe they're still creating. That's probably what they're doing. They might just take a minute to do it, but they'll be there. Yeah, but if we need to roll back, it's just as simple as doing a Docker service rollback. And then, so that'll just go back to like the last thing that it was instead of the update, which we can absolutely do that. You just do a sudo and then Docker service rollback. And then what was it like my app? My app web. Cool. And that's actually, this one might not have even deployed. I think it's my app web instead of my app. But I think you guys get the point of it getting modified. It's just simple scale, and then just deploying it back. Let me actually make this change real quick, so I don't forget about it later. There we go. Cool. Does anyone have any questions on Docker Swarm yet?
Not really.
Cool. Yeah, this is just kind of an intro into like container orchestration with replicas. That's going to be a thing in Kubernetes, which we're going to spend like a full 3 weeks on. So I don't know if you guys will actually be using Docker Swarm. I think, just a couple assignments here and there. But really for the assessments, you'll be using Kubernetes. I mean, I guess you could use Docker Swarm if you want, but Kubernetes is definitely something you'd want to get more experience on. It's something that's really good to show up on resumes or to talk about. And it's just widely used in the industry across the board. Like hands down, it's like the #1 player. It's kind of like picking like AWS's cloud over I don't know, like Google's cloud. AWS is hands down the biggest cloud provider out there. And so that's pretty much Kubernetes. Yeah, so there's a couple assignments. Docker Swarm assignment, pretty much doing exactly what I just did right here. Just do know that your security groups that are attached to your EC2 instances, you will need to include The inbound and outbound, you could either specify the IPs directly, or you could just do like a quad all, like 00 to allow anything and like all traffic in and out. That's totally fine, but they'll need that to be able to have that connection. Let's see what else. Yep, and your EC2s will also need to have Docker installed on them. I don't think they'll come with it installed with like an Ubuntu or an Amazon EC2 image. So you just have to, do like a sudo apt install Docker, whatever, whatever kind of image you have to package manager is on that image. And then there is a Docker CI/CD with that's kind of introducing this Docker Swarm with using GitHub Actions. So you guys already know about GitHub Actions, and so this is just kind of integrating with it. Cool. Well, with that being said, I will